Thank you, Catherine. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody at home. I feel like one of these days I'll take this mask off and it'll be somebody else under here. Thank the three of you for laughing. I'm sure everybody at home got a big chuckle out of that. Anyway, the theme for this month is renewal. And, we're trying to renew our congregational life here. And we've got some strategies for that, including the small group ministries, the Soul Matters Light, if you will, that will be unrolling later on in the month. And then the past couple of weeks, we've been talking about renewal on Sunday mornings. We've thought about renewal sort of in terms of homecoming and then also in terms of the refining and regenerative power of water and community. And the renewal in those themes was implicit. It was implicit. Today I want to be a little bit more explicit, and I want to talk about renewal directly. So, how about it? Do you feel like being renewed? Okay, it's a legitimate question because renewal doesn't necessarily come easily. And so I guess that's the fair warning, right? Renewal sometimes takes some work, and work might be the easiest part of it. So what would it be like? Imagine it just for a second. Just imagine, close your eyes. Close your eyes. Just for a bit, put your imagination to work. What would it look and feel like to experience personal renewal? Even you folks at home, go ahead and close your eyes. Imagine, what would it look like to experience personal renewal? Now, what would it look like to experience a more social renewal, a societal renewal? What would it look like if our civilization renewed itself? And lastly, what would ecological renewal look like? And I suppose by that I mean our relationship with our ecology. Ecology is in a constant process of renewal, but what if our relationship with our environment underwent a renewal? What would that look like? Imagine what that would look like. And then I wonder if there are lessons learned from that last vision, or actually any of those visions, that can apply to the personal, right? Like all of those three levels, the personal, the social, the ecological, like everything else, as we affirm, are interdependent. So I wonder if there's a thematic thread for you from the personal to the social or societal to the ecological. I wonder if there is some connection between those three levels for you. So renewal could be one of these words in religious settings like transformation or love, both of which I will mention later today, that get used to the point where they lose a little bit of meaning, right? Or renewal, it can sound fantastical. But it's not. It's not a fantasy. There are actual steps we can take, practices we can engage in, and methods that we can adopt that will bring us into, or at least toward, a state of renewal. Before we get to that, however, I'd like to sink into that feeling that you just conjured for yourselves, that feeling of renewal, just to remind you Let it really inhabit you, what that feels like, that goodness of renewal. That's sort of the reward, right? At the end of the trial, you get renewed. So I need you to keep that in your mind, what that feeling is like. And actually, to help us understand that feeling a little bit more, we're going to use our service associate today, who is Rebecca Lindley. And I'd like to ask Rebecca if she could share with us a time when she felt renewed, and maybe reflect even a little bit on what went into that and how it felt when it was happening.
Thanks, Ron. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to everyone at home. Renewal. Whenever you ask a question, Ron, I always look it up in the dictionary. Feels like a good place to start. Look up the key word. So it's a word from Old English, and it really means to restore to freshness. Another definition is to restore to the original. And I'm not sure I fully agree with that, because sometimes we actually don't want to stay where we were. We want something new and different. I can clearly recall 2 times in my life when I experienced deep personal renewal. The first time was in my 20s. I'd fallen away from my United Church upbringing, even though those were very fundamental beliefs and a whole world that I was immersed in when I was growing up in my teen years. I kind of shed my allegiance to those beliefs, but I was clearly missing something. I had just moved to Thunder Bay at the time. I was there as a student. It was Thanksgiving weekend, and there was just kind of a feeling of being out of sorts. Thanksgiving, right? A time for reflection, where you are, where you're going, what you're grateful for. It was a long weekend, so it felt more out of sorts. I went for a hike on the Saturday. If any of you have been to Thunder Bay, one of the famous hikes is on the Sleeping Giant, Nanabiju. It's a beautiful 22-kilometer hike. So my Saturday definitely had this, beautiful autumn day, deep breathing experience. And that probably set me well for the next day. I made the decision, a little bit spur of the moment, to go to the Unitarian fellowship there and attend a service. I'd been hearing about Unitarianism for the previous year from a friend who'd grown up in Hamilton in the Unitarian community. And the one friend I was there with in Thunder Bay made the decision to go back to the Catholic Church for her mourning. I always think there's a bit of irony there for my decision to come to Unitarianism, and she went back to Catholicism, but it's all good. And so that beautiful morning, I walked to the service, and I experienced their multi-generational, vibrant congregation, and I was drawn into it. For all the reasons that we as UUers know, people come and people stay. And for me, that was a deep sense of spiritual renewal, reawakening. And that started a whole new spiritual path for me. Sometimes renewal happens kind of accidentally. It's a sequence of unplanned events, or maybe each event was planned, but the sequence wasn't really planned, not consciously anyways. And it leads to something far bigger than we ever anticipated. So renewal can definitely be unexpected. Or it can be intentionally created, enabled. So fast forward 20 years. As many of you know, our family was living in Pemberton before we moved here. We were there for 15 years, and we've only been part of this congregation since 2016. For the years that we lived in Pemberton, although I would still identify as a UUer, I didn't feel like it was a vibrant part of my everyday. Without a congregation, the community to be part of, it just felt like my values, my faith was, one step removed from my everyday. I think in hindsight, it probably wasn't that far away, but it felt so. And in those busy years of raising your little kids, it just felt like spirituality was really missing in the everyday life we had. So when we moved to North Vancouver, I remember it well, in late August 2016, we were intentionally seeking renewal in all senses. Jill and I needed renewal in our work. Pemberton, our work life was full, like super full, too full. But equally, it was very fulfilling. But we made a decision, we needed a renewal. We also needed a renewal of our relationship with each other, with our kids who were blossoming into teenage years. And so we intentionally sought out this congregation, to restart our spiritual life. And I remember it so well. It was also a beautiful autumn morning, the first service in September 2016. And I walked into the service, and within minutes, it felt like coming home. I think I cried in every service for the first few months. In fact, I remember someone saying that to me in November. They said, I was going to come introduce myself like one of those first services, but you were, you're emotionally absorbed. But I remember it so well. It felt like flopping into a super familiar, comfortable piece of furniture. Except it wasn't a piece of furniture that I could just be a sloth and ignore the world. It was like something that held me up gently and positively and encouraged me to pay attention to the world and be the best person that I can be. Yeah, renewal. So I also think we're all going to hopefully find some kind of renewal when we're outside this pandemic. That renewal we find from so many things that we return to, right? Looking at each other's eyes from more than 2 meters away or closer than 2 meters away. Handshakes, hugs. So I know there's a renewal yet to come. So this morning, our chalice. We're going to dedicate the lighting of our flaming chalice to personal renewal. Renewal that has happened, renewal that is happening, or that has yet to happen. We dedicate the lighting of this chalice to restoring and reviving our collective and individual spirits. We kindle this flame as a symbol of our gathering. May the light of understanding illuminate our darkness. May the warmth of sharing bring us peace.
So I don't know if you guys noticed it as you were reading the words to the hymn up here, but like the light was casting a shadow. You can kind of see it up here still through the heat waves. Can you guys see that? It's like there's something invisible here that's being cast by the light up there that's moving, and it looked like the guy that was standing in the van had the sun rays that were animated, and I was like, is that an animated slide? And it wasn't, it was just this stuff. So there will be a sermon in the future about light passing through something invisible. Like, that is too rich of a metaphor to let go. So remind me about that. And the fire, it makes me think in terms of renewal. I think about the fires down south, right? Like, there's going to be a renewal after that. But the indication there, of course, is that there's a bit of trauma sometimes before the renewal happens, right? And I appreciate you ferreting out and teasing out the different meanings of renewal and setting aside maybe the one that said, oh, it goes back to what it was. Because I agree, I don't think that's necessarily the renewal that you could actually have, and it's certainly not the one that I'm going to be preaching about this morning. The kind of renewal that I want to think about this morning can take some clues, some hints in terms of how we get to it from the season that we find ourselves in. For instance, this week witnesses a few holidays that will guide us. Holidays, of course, are rich in meaning and wisdom. Whether or not you are in the tradition that is celebrating them, you can still understand the wisdom that they carry. And one of this week's holidays was that of Mabon. Mabon's a neo-pagan celebration of Thanksgiving and harvest, and it's centered, of course, on the equinox, which occurred earlier this week. The equinox itself is a moment of equilibrium and a portal into a new season, a transformation, a transformative moment created by balance, which I think is an interesting concept. Transformation is created in this moment of balance, or is enabled in this moment of balance. A moment of neither this nor that, and so replete with potential for change and for the potential for renewal. So Mabon occurs on the fulcrum of the autumnal equinox and juxtaposes two interdependent necessities: harvest, life, and fall, death. But even in death, as we walk along the creek sides here on the North Shore, you can smell the life in it, right? Like, those creeks in their decay are so rich and vibrant. So, in that sense, equinox and Mabon implicitly honor the cyclicality of life. And when I say cyclicality, I don't mean a redundant rerun of repetitive moments, but rather as a pattern of progression balanced with return. A spiral of regeneration, a spiral of life. And then also, today is Yom Kippur for our Jewish cousins. Yom Kippur is the Day of Atonement. So I've been thinking about the necessity and benefits of atonement and how that might interface with transformation and gratitude. Now, atonement that's a method, that's a practice. It's real. It's a bona fide change maker. It's an escalator. Without it, we wallow in the swamp of our own shame and timidity. With it, we elevate and transform those repetitive cycles of othering into an evolving spiral of creativity and love. So these holidays are tied to the meaning of the seasons. And seasons are tied to place. Thus, the cycles of our place, where we are, shows us the way to renew. The wisdom of these holidays tells us that atonement, gratitude, and transformation have something to do with each other. Perhaps something to do with renewal. Atonement is transformational, and gratitude is the expression of renewal, the emotional response to an evolving spiral of life. That song reminds me of a professor I had, I think it was of church history in seminary, and he was an Episcopalian, so he came every day, collared, the whole bit, and he had a congregant who wanted the Circle of Life played for their relative at a memorial service, and he was really irritated by that, because that's not Christian theology. It's not you go to heaven, right? Like at a memorial service, you're talking about reuniting with, Jesus and God, and he's like, this is not our story. I think he did it anyway because he's a nice guy. You're not going to not do that. But I was like much of the time in seminary, I was like, they should have been a UU. Yeah, so, life and death. And the thing about getting back into the circle and the renewal is at the moment right before renewal, oftentimes will feel like an existential threat. It'll feel like you're about to die, right? All of these moments, passages, rites of passage, there's always a critical moment in a rite of passage where you're almost trying to fool the participant into believing that they're about to die, and that through that death experience or that near-death experience, new life emerges. So it can be scary. It can be scary. As we listen to the wisdom of the turning seasons as it gets cold. Last night I was a little bit, my bathroom floor was cold when I stepped on it last night for the first time this year. As it gets a little colder and we listen to the wisdom of the seasons, I want to give you a little cup of truth to hold on to hold in your hands and make you feel well and assured the way a hot cup of tea might do. Right? So you can actually do this for me, embody this for a minute, like hold your hands out as though you're holding a little handleless cup of hot tea. It'll help you remember, okay? This warm cup of clarity contains the nourishment that you will need on your journey toward renewal, and its contents, the contents of this warm cup that will carry you through is this sentiment. You don't have to be afraid. You don't have to be afraid. You can set it all down, all your worry, your dread, your regret, your fear of having regrets, your fallibility, feelings of inferiority, any stupid memory you have of someone, anyone telling you that you weren't worthy. You could let that go. You don't have to be afraid. Not even of death. You can let it go because there is an essence, an ultimacy that welcomes you completely, spiritually, cellularly. The truth is that you are deeply connected and thoroughly loved. And there is nothing you can do to earn or lose that love. It is entirely organic and non-contingent. You can only forget it or remember it. And I'm here to help you remember that love and connection are the primary action of the universe. Attraction is the fundamental law of creation. There would be nothing without it. attraction, yearning. Love creates all that you behold. And it's not, at least the way I think of it, it's not so much the ground as being. That's not the metaphor that I want really, because it's too solid for me. It's more like the river or the wind of being that does give body and animates our bodies and is the state from which we arise and to which we return and in which we perpetually exist. And we feel it as love. You are a beloved child of the universe. There's a catch. Actually, it's not a catch. There's a trick to it. You won't really know that you don't need to be afraid, despite whatever assurance I might offer you. You won't really know that you don't need to be afraid until you are afraid. Them's the rules. The road to fearlessness passes through fear. And that way, we can feel and know rather than merely suppose and postulate. And this is not good news. At least that part. Because there are many of us, myself included, who don't want to go there. Many of us who are afraid of being afraid. And worse yet, the road to fearlessness goes through knowing you are afraid. So many of us, again, myself included, are afraid without knowing it. I'd go so far as to say that that is the default mode for the world that we maintain. To be afraid without acknowledging it. And of course, this results in all kinds of harmful reactivity that is far from love. So the first step is to find your fear. And of course, that's easier said than done, for the fear does not want to be found. And then once you do, well, that's not much fun. So why do it if it's so painful? What's on the other side of fear? Of course, I think you all know this already. On the other side of fear is a sovereignty that is not contingent on power, but rather is organically oriented to generous creation. Or to be more succinct, love. Love, the experience of love, is on the other side of fear. So that cup that I gave you, that's really not a cup of truth. I said it was, it wasn't. It's a cup of faith. It's not truth yet. It's not really true knowledge of love. Rather, it's the faith that you are loved. And that faith will supply the courage to face our fear. And then knowing our fear will usher us into actually feeling and truly experiencing love. So the move is from faith to experience. From faith in love through fear, and then into the experience of love. And that will be our homecoming. That will be our renewal. So sip from this cup. Attend to your faith.
This is a medley of a couple of very gentle and quiet waltzes from Tennessee, called the Swananoa Waltz and Midnight on the Water.
So knowing you are held inherently in and by love, knowing that love is your fundamental nature, will be helpful in moving through fear. And this is important, considering the wisdom of this season and our theme for renewal. For while faith in our love is the key to renewal, it is so because we need it to pass through this passage of atonement. And that means coming face to face with one's own trespass. Now, often that encounter, coming face to face with your own trespass, more often than not, that ignites our defensiveness. And yet, atonement is how we do renewal. So atonement is about repairing a disconnection. I mean, it's not like repairing a toaster or a broken teacup. What's broken is far closer to the heart. What's broken is the integrity of a relationship, a harming of the bond of interbeing, an action in discord with the fundamental truth of I am of thee, you are of me. It's close and it It hurts to be in need of atonement. And as we approach atonement, we are often beset by shame or guilt. As we come face to face with our trespass, we are beset by shame or guilt. And yet, we're also compelled by our fundamental nature, which is nothing less than love and the desire for connection. So this is a really tough place to be in, caught between shame and love. So this is why atonement requires courage. This is what your hot couple do. Atonement requires a vulnerability, and that's scary. What will see us through this fear? That faith. That faith. But it becomes not only cozy and comforting, it becomes crucial. Atonement begins with the recognition of harm that we have done. Now, one of the first things we'll experience when we have that realization is either guilt or shame, right? And the work of research scientist Brené Brown reveals that guilt is about behavior, while shame is about the whole person. So the difference is one between I feel bad for spilling the tea, that's guilt, and I am bad for spilling the tea, that's shame. She observes that shame makes us feel unworthy of connection, the very thing that we essentially are. So perhaps that is why shame is felt as an existential threat that triggers flight, fight, or freeze, and is experienced as trauma. Now, this is where shame goes from uncomfortable to dangerous. Hurt people hurt people. You've heard this before. Hurt people hurt people. Trauma perpetuates itself. And sure enough, Brown has found that shame corresponds with addiction and bullying. So I wonder, and I would even forward this as a hypothesis, that shame on a societal level corresponds with authoritarianism. So I see that happen in my homeland. I do not want to see it happen here. States are in a moment where they are trying to atone for 400 years of legal and cultural systems of oppression, from slavery to the war on drugs to the imprisoned industrial complex, and all the cultural props and products of the thinking that led to those systems. They're trying to atone for that. But the problem is most of the severe damage has been done by people long dead, or individuals we don't know, or systems that folks feel by and large removed from, however privileged they are by those same systems. Folks understand, though, how that baked-in advantage implicates them, implicates us, but not what we can do about it. And because there is no direct behavior to address, that could possibly undo those 400 years. There's no guilt to be atoned for. And a whole swath of society drops into shame. Flight, fight, or freeze. Trauma, addiction, bullying, authoritarianism. Trump is what happens when the white American patriarchy feels shame and is too frightened to atone for the cause of that shame. They're frightened because they don't know that they're loved. They feel their being is worthless. And I don't want that to happen here. Now, Canada has a legacy for which it must atone. Now, at least there's been some official acknowledgement and work on that here. But there's still work for us to do. And if it's not about racism, and it is, it will be about our treatment of our Mother Earth. Or we'll feel shame about our treatment of our sisters and daughters. Or about our participation in global capitalism, or the objectification of the precious gifts of the earth. We've made some mistakes. So these legacy realities in which we nonetheless still participate and find it difficult to extricate ourselves from will provide plenty of invitations into shame. We cannot go there. At least we can't stay there. If we get mired in shame, the world will end. It is as simple as that. So that cup of tea that I gave you earlier, that faith, that truth that you are an expression of love, that you are loved, that you are inherently worthy of love, you got to keep breathing in that steam. That faith will carry us through shame in the hard work of atonement. For atonement promises renewal. And to feel that love, we have to pass through that fear. So now I ask you this. Earlier, I asked you what it would be like to be personally or societally or ecologically renewed. Now I ask you, what would it look like to feel or be? What would it look, feel, or be like to experience personal atonement? You might note if there's any sense of shame coming up right now or fear, but know that you're loved. You are loved. What would it look like, feel like, be like to experience personal atonement? What would it look like to experience societal atonement? What would the experience of ecological atonement feel like? And are there lessons from that last vision that you can apply to the personal? Or is there a common thread, a thematic thread that runs through all of them? Atonement is hard. It can be painful, but without it, we find ourselves stuck in cycles of perpetual trauma. However, keeping faith that you are worthy of love no matter your sins or the sins of the society you were born into will get you through the hard part. Atonement is transformational, and life becomes beautiful, has integrity. And we find ourselves boundlessly grateful. And then you will know it won't be faith anymore. You will know it like you know your favorite pillow. You are loved. Mindful of Mabon and Yom Kippur, you will be renewed. And this world will have a chance. I would invite you into the spirit of prayer. Son, we thank you for your light, for your energy, for reminding us of grace. Reminding us of the circle of the seasons, and the wisdom of our place. Earth, we thank you for gravity, for holding us close, for giving us bodies and atmosphere. Water, we thank you for life. Water is life. And air, we thank you for showing us how the Spirit moves, for connecting us. Being the fabric through which we wander. May these grace-given elements assure us of our connectivity and worth. May we experience our interaction with them and with one another as love. And may we then use that love to give us courage for when those relationships are broken by us, that we may repair them. And not fall into shame, but rise through love into regeneration in the spiral of life. We pray for the forests in the south and witness them regenerating and renewing after their trauma, and take from them a lesson. Amen.
So this is a song that everybody knows, of course, Here Comes the Sun, but due to the fact that we're just past the equinox, we're going to call it There Goes the Sun. And since we're not going to sing it, you can make up your own lyrics. Oops. I must tune for your safety here.
Thanks, Paul. We are the North Shore Unitarians, and our mission is to empower people to live with greater depth, meaning, and purpose. And we are quickly learning how to do that in very different ways amidst a pandemic. We've now figured out how we can gather in small numbers together here on Sunday morning, and the rest of us online. Little note about that, for anyone who's wondering, the door is open to make us COVID compliant. So some people wonder about the noise, but we actually have to have the door open, just so you know. But in this community, in varying ways, we celebrate people from all walks of life. No matter who you are, how you live, no matter who you love, or how you experience the sacred. Our goal is to make everyone feel welcome here. We have a few announcements, as always. The reading group on anti-racism has 30 people signed up. That's amazing. But there's only 3 males. So we'd like a bit more diversity. So anyone interested in signing up for that, which is a big, robust group, we'd love to have you join. Soul Matters Light. This is a Soul Matters we've had in our congregation for a number of years, but there's a whole new initiative about to start called Soul Matters Light, and we'd love everyone to sign up for that. There'll be more information coming about that in the next couple weeks. As ever with all our announcements, they're in the weekly e-bulletin that gets sent to us. There's a little bit of confusion about these services. So there's a 9:30 service and an 11:30 service. Some people thought the 9:30 was only for families with kids, but actually the kids meet separately outside, so anyone is welcome to that 9:30 service, and there still is room in that service. So just know either service are an option for you, with or without kids. With kids, only at 9:30. And lastly, our outreach recipient for September is St. James Music Academy, which is a nonprofit association or organization in the downtown east side, and their goal is to social change through the power and love of music. There are donation plates at the back of the sanctuary for those folks who are here, and those folks online, you can make arrangements by e-transferring to the church. And I think now we'll extinguish our chalice. We thank everyone for being here and for being online with us as we learn and grow in this times. Please join together as we extinguish this chalice. We extinguish this flame, but carry with us the light of vision and the warmth of hope. The world calls us to live with depth, meaning, and purpose. We go forth with courage and love.
I forget, do we do this song first? Do I go first? Okay. So as we leave this place, this sacred time and place that we have gathered together, that we have knitted together, that we have fashioned by our presence and by our intention, let us go forth knowing that we are worthy of love, that our essence is love, and let us use that. Let us take refuge in that when the going gets rough, no matter whether it's about atonement or any other rough patch of our life. Know that you are loved. And let's get to work. Thank you for coming. Let us go in peace, and let us go singing, or at least signing.
Not quite signing, it's choreography. So we could sing.
And you could rise and embody your spirit, and you could play along at home.